How's it going, everybody? Marvel Cross 316 coming back with you with another comic book flashback. We're looking at the Amazing Spider-Man issue number 7 today. If you are new to these videos and this is the first time that you're watching, I'm glad that you're here. I hope you like this little review. What we do in these reviews is that I review the artwork, I review the storyline, so I spoil everything that's going on in the stories. We're just taking a flashback. We're looking back in the past at some of these great stories. And what I've done so far, if you've not looked at my other reviews, go back and watch them. I reviewed issues 1 through 6. So now we're going to be looking at issue number 7. And if you have not read issue number 7, if you don't have a reprint of this issue, go back. If you have the issue, I would recommend reading it, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to spoil everything that's going on in this issue, and I'm just going to give you my honest opinion as to what I think about this issue. So we're looking at the second appearance of the Vulture, and like I said, I've already reviewed the first appearance of the Vulture, so go back and watch that if you haven't. So let's look at the cover real quick. The cover is very generic. I would say that Steve Ditko has done a lot better issues in the past with his art on the cover. So I wouldn't say this is his best cover, but I think it fits for this particular issue. And I'll tell you why. Because Spider-Man and the Vulture, they do a lot of fighting in the air. Now let's look at the title, The Return of the Vulture. We have the classic Spider-Man logo here that we see in the 60s. Also, we need to recognize the people that contributed to this issue. So we have Stan Lee as the writer of this issue. He also wrote issues 1 through 6, like we've already said. We also have Steve Ditko doing the artwork, and then Art Zemek doing the letters. Now, I don't necessarily look at the letter page, but if that's something that you'd like me to look at in future videos, just comment below and let me know. Now let's get started. Let's look at this classic story, issue number 7. And remember, we're looking back in the past, and in issue number 2, Spider-Man defeated the Vulture using this device here, the anti-magnetic inverter. We learned in issue number 2 that the Vulture, his wings were powered through magnetism. He used magnetism to help him fly. So this is how Spider-Man thinks he will, hopefully we might see in this issue. Will he use this same device? Well, let's look. Now, before we get there, we need to kind of look back as to what the Vulture has been doing this whole time since his defeat in issue number 2. Well, he's been in prison, and not only has he been in prison, but he has also, as we learned, been the best behaved prisoner in the place. Now, why is he being the best behaved prisoner in the place? Well, it's because he's trying to trick everybody into thinking that he wants to get out on legal terms, but that's not what he's going to do. This whole time, while he's not being watched, he's been building new wings, a new set of wings, and we learn that he's trying to escape. He's just trying to find that perfect opportunity, and his opportunity comes, and look what happens. He escapes. So that is the introduction that we see in this issue, is that the Vulture escapes from prison, and of course New York City, the news about the Vulture comes to New York City pretty quickly. There, I got it off my tongue. Sometimes I get tongue twisted. Like most of us, we all get tongue twisted. It's just part of our humanity. But let's continue looking at this issue. Remember, we have the rivalry between Peter Parker and Flash Thompson in high school. Flash Thompson always giving Peter Parker a hard time, as he's always seeming to leave the scene whenever something exciting happens, and Flash Thompson has noticed that, as Peter Parker has to get up and leave coincidentally whenever he hears something going on in the news that concerns danger, or a villain is on the scene. Now, let's kind of get on to the main action here. See, the Vulture has escaped. He's gotten back into costume. He's loving just the notoriety. You could tell the Vulture in this issue loves the power that comes just to being invincible with those wings of his. Stan Lee did a terrific job to showing how the Vulture tries to show his power and thinks that the people below him, like the people on the streets, are just his subjects. They don't deserve to be recognized. He thinks he can rule them. We also learn, Spider-Man comes on the scene. He's the only one that seems to know the Vulture very well, because Spider-Man defeated the Vulture in issue number 2. Spider-Man thinks that he can use the same device, the anti-magnetic inverter, to defeat the Vulture. Now, the Vulture knows that his wings, the wings that he built in prison, are a lot better. They're an advancement compared to his old wings. And Spider-Man thinks that he can just touch that little button right here and the Vulture will automatically just, be defeated. And the Vulture knows this is what Spider-Man has up his sleeve. This is what Spider-Man has up his sleeve. So the Vulture plays along with this, knowing that once Spider-Man comes to investigate, he can attack. And that's exactly what happens as the Vulture swoops back up and surprisingly attacks Spider-Man, takes him by surprise, and he just starts attacking Spider-Man in the air. Spider-Man loses his balance and falls all the way down on top of this rooftop here. And for the rest of the story, Spider-Man has to fight the Vulture with a sprained arm. He doesn't break his arm because, remember, Spider-Man has super strength. So any fall like this would have killed a person or broken maybe a limb, but not Spider-Man, since he has superpowers. That's how Stan Lee wrote the story, so that's what the reader has to infer. Now Spider-Man gets back up, having to nurse his wounds, knowing that he has been defeated. Remember, Spider-Man is an enigma to Aunt May. Aunt May thinks that Spider-Man is a villain, and it would break her heart if she found out that her nephew is Spider-Man. So Peter Parker, we learn, has to hide his secret identity from Aunt May. So it's always something Stan Lee adds here in these stories, is that Peter Parker has to find some way to hide his secret identity from her, and that is great storytelling right there. Now Aunt May learns that Peter Parker sprained his arm, and she immediately takes him to the doctors, and she tells him to stop playing rough games. So Peter Parker tells her that he sprained his arm by playing volleyball, and of course she buys into that. But the people in high school, at his high school, don't buy into it, and so they think it was just a big joke. He might have sprained his arm from turning a page in one of his books, because they always make fun of Peter Parker for being the bookworm. And so Peter Parker never has any luck when he's in high school. He is not respected at all. Now let's cut back to the Vulture. The Vulture, his master plan here is to rob J. Jonah Jameson from his money. He knows that J. Jonah Jameson is very rich. He has a lot of money because J. Jonah Jameson is the head of the Daily Bugle. So that is exactly what the Vulture is going to do. He's going to come to the Daily Bugle and he's going to rob J. Jonah Jameson at gunpoint. Vultures seem to be using guns a lot in this issue. It's very uncharacteristic of the Vulture to use guns in later issues. So this is very surprising to see, but of course Peter Parker, I don't know how he does it, but he escapes as Vulture is trying his best to take, J. Jonah Jameson's money. And J. Jonah Jameson is not going to back down. So this is the first time that we need to note that Spider-Man fights a supervillain in the Daily Bugle. It's seen for the first time that there's going to be a battle within the Daily Bugle. And of course, J. Jonah Jameson does not like that one bit because his office, the whole place is being just torn apart through this whole battle. And this is a great battle scene that Steve Ditko and Stan Lee put together here. It's a very great story. I would definitely recommend you read this classic story. It's very great. It's not one of the best stories, but for what it's worth, if it was 12 cents, I would definitely pay 12 cents back then to get this issue. So again, great storytelling here, great artwork. It's definitely something that I would recommend somebody read. And I mean, just the artwork explains itself. That's all I have to say. Now, this is how the story ends here. We see the Spider-Man here fighting the Vulture in the air. The Vulture thinks that he has won. He's victorious because Spider-Man is so up high. But Spider-Man has something up his sleeve. He webs both of the Vulture's wings, puts them together so the Vulture is going to plummet because he can't support himself without his wings. And Spider-Man webs up this parachute. So this is how the Vulture is defeated, by webbing up his wings and allowing him to slowly go back down to the ground to be captured by the police. So that is how the Vulture is defeated in this issue. It's a very original way to defeat the Vulture, something that readers would not have guessed. And of course, you can't have a good ending without something funny going on. So Spider-Man has had enough of J. Jonah Jameson, and so he just webs up his face. So very hilarious right here. Very hilarious exchange between both Spider-Man and the Vulture. One thing I noticed about this issue is that Spider-Man starts to make a lot of jokes, a lot of wisecracks throughout this story. So we see a lot of character development in this story. So I'd definitely say this is an improvement upon some of the other issues. Also, we see the development of Peter Parker and Betty Brant's relationship, and we see something going on here. We see that Peter Parker has feelings for Betty Brant. So will this relationship start to blossom in other issues? You'll have to find out in more reviews. But other than that, I hope y'all have enjoyed this review. Make sure to comment down below what you liked about this issue, some of the artwork, and also, as always, subscribe and like the video. And I will see y'all in the next review.